The stars are right, and that means it's time for another episode of The Whisper in Darkness. I'm your host, the Manfromleng. Thank you very much for joining me today. On this episode, we are continuing with our review of the player cards in the Dunwich Legacy Investigator Expansion for the benefit of new players. This is part 3 of our look at the Survivor cards. We are going to take a look at Fire Extinguisher, Flare, Lure, and Stroke of Luck. There are spoilers throughout if you care about that sort of thing. If you enjoy what you hear, remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Just a quick reminder of how we rate cards here on The Whisper in Darkness. The best of the best get an Elder Sign, while the worst of the worst get an Auto Fail, and the cards in between get a +1, 0, or Elder Thing respectively. Cards that you build around or are good in one particular deck get a Bless token, while cards that we believe are destined to end up on the list of taboos or are bad for the game get a Curse token. Before we get started, I'd like to thank the patrons of this channel for their tremendous support. The Arkham Horror LCG community is amazing, and these people have gone above and beyond to bring you content like these player card reviews. If you'd like to support the channel's goals and see your name on this list, head over to patreon.com, sign up for a tier of your choice, and claim your rewards. Special thanks to Coleman Road Chitty for the amazing art that graces the channel, Nicole Fiscus for the new Whisper in Darkness logo that I use for the podcast, and Nate Lost in Time and Space for the intro as well as the overlays. Thank you very much. I couldn't do it without you. Without further ado, let's get started. Welcome back, everyone, to our review of the player cards in the Dunwich Legacy Investigator Expansion for the benefit of new players. This is part 3 of our review of the Survivor cards. This time we're going to kick things off with Fire Extinguisher. It's a level 2, it's a 2-cost asset that has 1 experience point, an agility skill icon, item, tool, and melee traits. As an action, you can fight, you get +1 combat for this attack, or as an action, you can exile the Fire Extinguisher, evade, you get +3 agility for this skill test. If you are successful, evade each other enemy engaged with you as well, and it takes up a hand slot. Exile is one of the new mechanics that was introduced in the Dunwich Legacy cycle, primarily on Survivor cards. Basically, if you trigger the exile ability on these cards, you remove it from the game, and then if it costs experience, which most of the exile cards do, then you have to buy the card again. So if you paid 1 XP for the Fire Extinguisher, you get to pay 1 XP for it again to put it back in your deck. And if you decide not to do that, you can just put a level 0 card in there without spending XP to bring your deck size back up to a legal deck size. What do you guys think about this one?
I have read both of those effects, and then I have proceeded to put this card into my binder and never look at it ever again. It's not good at all. Like, even compared to a knife, it's really not that good. At least the knife you can pitch to deal damage, which is at least useful. This is just play Survival Instinct if you really need to evade multiple enemies.
Oh, you took the words out of my mouth. I was going to say the same thing.
Sorry.
Oh, come on, man.
It's just not good. Like, if it gave you a more meaningful combat boost, say if it give you like +2 or +3, maybe, but and it takes up a hand slot too. Like, man, there's just so many things going against this card.
I think you're right, Nate. I think the way to go with this one is just play Survival Instinct instead. It kind of does the same thing and bails you out and gives you an action to move, free action to move out. Where this, like, you have to put this into play, costing an action, and then it'll just get you the evade, but you're still stuck where you are, and you spent 2 resources and a extra action on top instead of just playing Survival Instinct. Yeah, don't play this card. It's so bad. Even when it's like at its best, a level 0 card does the same thing but better.
Yeah, Survival Instinct really makes this card almost unnecessary. If the fight was better, I could maybe see it, but I mean, it's basically an expensive knife if you're fighting with it, and in fact, knife is better because at least you can pitch the knife for extra damage. The evade, I mean, is very generous at +3, but Survival Instinct basically gives you a nice bonus as well and lets you move and disengage from all the other enemies. And then if you really want a good effect, you can pick up for another XP. You get Survival Instinct 2, which lets you evade all the enemies. So this one is kind of left twisting in the wind with nothing really much to do. There is a level 3 upgrade that was recently released in the Edge of the Earth Investigator Expansion. It tweaks the evade a little bit and gives you a bonus damage for the fight. So that sort of solves that problem. How would you guys rate this one?
I think this one's a pretty easy tentacle. It's just not really that good.
Yeah, not only is it situational, like when you'd want to use it, as I mentioned, even when it's like at its best, you could have played a 0 XP card instead. Yeah, this is a tentacle.
Yeah, unfortunately, this one gets a tentacle. Back when this was released, this came out in the Miskatonic Museum Mythos pack, which also happens to have the next card that we're going to talk about that is way better than this one if you need to kill something. And so this one just kind of was released in a pack with a better fight card, and a better evade card already existed. So it was like, why does this card exist exactly? So not a card you should be putting in your deck. Fire Extinguisher. You can't necessarily say the same about Flare, though. It is a 2-cost event that costs 1 experience point. Wild skill icon. Tactic trait, you either choose one, fight, you get +3 combat and deal +2 damage for this attack, exile Flare, or you search the top 9 cards of your investigator deck for an ally asset and put it into play under your control, then exile Flare, shuffle the searched deck. This one is a huge thematic win. I mean, both effects make a great deal of sense. The fact that this can deal 3 damage to an enemy, I'm willing to pay 1 XP for that. Yeah. And then you can also use it to find that ally you need and put it into play for free. So not only do you get to tutor an ally, but you get to not pay for it. that's pretty sweet.
Yeah, I've used this card to great effect in many a deck. It's great with agency backup and Tommy.
Oh, that's right. Like really big allies.
Yeah.
Like Leo DeLuca costs, that type of stuff.
Yeah. Leo DeLuca and Wendy is really nice too. Yeah. Yeah, there's plenty of good targets, even just in core Dunwich, to be able to use this card. Having the ability to deal 3 damage in a pinch with a really sizable boost is really nice. It's worth the 1 XP that you're going to have to spend over and over again, I feel. Because sometimes you just don't play this card because you just don't need it. So you don't have to necessarily use it. You can always pitch it for that 1 icon, which is nice too.
Yeah. One thing that's worth noting that is not always intuitive is that if you do the second option to look for an ally, if the Flare misses, you don't exile it because it's a then. And then only happens if the sentence before it was successful, which is kind of nice. So I think what that means with Flare, which is kind of important, is it means you can do like 1 or 2 slots dedicated to like a really big ally, and then just rely on Flare to go find it. So you don't have to spend, say, 10 XP on your 2 agency backups, in your situation, Nate. You can just go, I have 1 agency backup in my deck, and I have 2 Flares. If my Flare misses, I don't exile the Flare, and then I don't feel so bad.
Yeah, that's a really good point you bring up. And it's also nice you can do it on any player in the table. It does say any investigator, so...
Yeah, there's some pretty hilarious stuff you can do with this. Just like steal people's allies. Yeah, so not only can Tommy Muldoon find his agency backup, but so can I. No, this is really good. Plus the top part, being able to do 3 damage in a single action without a weapon on the board, like that'll save your life. So this card's really good.
Yeah, now that I look at that fight action is sort of reminds me of Spectral Razor in Mystic, which was released much, much later. And Spectral Razor is basically a staple in Mystic at this point, simply because it gives you a sizable bonus and lets you deal 3 damage. You don't have to exile Spectral Razor, but at 1 XP, this is pretty decently priced. The thing I found about Survivors is that they don't really have Survivors top out for the most part at 3 XP, especially in Dunwich and Revised Core. They do receive 1 or 2 cards down the road that cost 4 and 5, but for the most part, you're 1, 2s, and 3s. And I find a lot of the Survivor 1 XP cards to be better than the 3 XP cards for the most part. So you should have the XP to pay for the exile on this one. How would you rate this one?
I'm gonna give this an Elder Sign. I think it's really quite good. Like both effects on this are effects that you want generally, like in your deck, and the fact that it sort of consolidates both of those effects into one card is really nice.
Yeah, I'd say it's really good. I don't think I'd go Elder Sign. I think I'll go +1 because I don't think this actually works all that well in every Survivor deck. I'm envisioning the Survivor deck where you have like very few really high impact allies. Because what you don't want to do is fire your flare and find the ally you don't want, So, so it kind of requires a little bit of like building, and yeah, I'd say this is +1. This is still really good.
Yeah, I'm gonna go +1 as well. I often find that I'm upgrading other cards before I pick up flare, so it's sort of, while I really like the effects, it's not the first card I'm reaching for in my decks. And I think the Survivor allies, being what they are at this point in the game, I mean, you've got Stray Cat, Peter Sylvester, and Aquina at this point. So the only other investigator who can take this besides Ashcan and Wendy would be Agnes. She has some better she has some pretty decent options in Peter and Arcane Initiate, either one of which I'd probably be pretty happy with drawing toward the beginning of the game. So I do think this one probably might even reach Elder Sign territory as your card pool expands, and you do get some of those really expensive allies like Agency Backup, where not only are you finding an ally, but you're saving yourself a boatload of resources to when you play it as well. The next card we are going to talk about is Lure. 1 cost event that costs 1 experience point. It has 2 agility skill icons. The trick trait, attached to your location during the enemy phase, each enemy that moves does so along the shortest path toward the attached location, instead of to where it would normally move. Forced effect, while attached at the end of the round, discard Lure. When I was a young Manfromleng, and I was just beginning to
a lad from Leng.
A lad from Leng. That's a good phrase. When I was a lad from Leng and just beginning my to play various CCGs, I would have loved this card because I loved sort of janky cards that had cool effects. I would have been very quick to build a deck around this card. But now I am an older, wiser, possibly more jaded Manfromleng, and I just don't have time for this crap anymore, to be honest. I racked my brain all week trying to think of situations when this card could be useful, and just made my head hurt. What do you guys think about this one?
If this card had fast, it would go a long way at making it a lot more useful, because at least then you could, maybe move somewhere, drop it down, move somewhere else, and not have to waste time putting it into play. But not only does it waste your time by having an effect that you got to sit there and kind of squint and think about, but then it wastes your time in game by actually taking an action too. I mean, that's just rude.
Yeah, just looking at it again, it's actually worse than I thought it was, because not only you have to attach it to your location, and you got to spend an action to do it. Okay, so you're already committing to attaching it to your location and then moving away. Oh my god, this is so bad.
I think there is one instance where this could be good, and it's in Curse of the Rougarou.
Oh yeah, because you actually have a map where lure would actually matter.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's the thing. Like, if you're in a hallway-like map, then lure basically does nothing. Yeah.
That, and in that specific scenario, quick spoilers, is that the enemy moves away from you, And
Oh
the
yeah,
lure can trap it somewhere for a turn, which can actually
yeah.
be helpful.
Okay, I think I know where this is useful. All right, I suspect that in early iterations of this game, prey, the prey instructions were more important than they actually are.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
good that you mentioned that because we've talked a lot about conditional cards during this review, and this one has so many conditions that you've got to fulfill to make it useful that it's just not worth your time. I mean, first you need the right map. You need to have a layout where enemies have multiple routes that are options for them to take. Then you need the right enemy. You need an enemy that has Hunter. Otherwise, it's probably not moving. It helps if that enemy has prey instructions that matter. Like a lot of enemies, and there are prey instructions on quite a few enemies in the revised core set. Enemies that target, say, lowest agility or lowest willpower and stuff like that. But you've got to be in a position where that prey instruction matters.
Yeah.
And that's pretty tough to set up. Again, like we've said, you need to play this, and then you either need to move away, so you have to have sort of a location that you were going for, or you can lure the enemy to you. But if you were luring the enemy to you, then it really depends on the enemy's prey instructions and stuff like that.
Yep.
Because, I mean, if a hunter has two choices and you're next to it, you can just move the enemy to you. You don't need to lure it. The game allows you to do that without a card. So, yeah, it's just a really tough card to make work. And the fact that it's gone at the end of the round.
I know that makes like no sense. Like why? Would it does it need to leave at the end of the round? Like it should leave like at least should leave after it's like actually drawn an enemy to it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I could
It's like
see
in
this.
it's like in Metal Gear Solid. Like if you throw a bottle or something and attract an enemy to go towards the the noise, it doesn't just stop after 5 seconds. It goes all the way to the noise. Lure should at least do that. You know.
The other scenario I could see this maybe working is in Undimensioned and Unseen, simply because the movement of the enemies in that is kind of random, and you do kind of want to bring them to you at some point when you're ready to deal with them. This can kind of help, but I'm not putting that in my deck for the middle of a campaign. There is a level 2 upgrade that was released in Before the Black Throne that actually lets you play this on a different location, which sort of solves the whole movement issue that you're dealing with, but now you're paying 2 XP for a pretty narrow card, so yeah.
Yeah, I think in like 99% of cases, there is a card, I think it's in the Forgotten Age, called Hiding Spot, that essentially does what you actually want Lure to do, and that is just like you hide for an enemy, you bypass an enemy for a round. And Hiding Spot is 0 XP. It's fast and it sticks around if it doesn't do anything. I know it's outside of Core and Dunwich, but I guess what I'm saying is even the designers realized that Lure is just not working as a card. Yeah, and gave us Hiding Spot instead.
Ratings?
Tentacle?
I think this is a pretty easy tentacle, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately, as much as the lad from Leng loves cards like this, the man from Leng does not. This one gets a tentacle, and when people ask me what I think the worst card in the game is, this is often on the tip of my tongue. I don't know if it's the absolute worst, but it's pretty low down the list. You know a card is bad when having 2 agility icons doesn't even save it. There's just way better options. I'm sure someone out there has built a marvelous lure deck, but it won't be me.
Hiding Spot, it's in Carcosa, not the Forgotten Age, which actually makes it better because it's been released again.
And if you're having trouble with the Devour Below from from the revised core, hiding spot is the answer to your prayers. That brings us to Stroke of Luck. It's a skill that costs 2 XP, wild skill icon, innate and fortune trait. Commit only to a skill test you are performing. After revealing chaos tokens for this test, you may choose to exile Stroke of Luck. If you do, this test is automatically successful unless you drew the auto-fail token, or unless an auto-fail was revealed at some point during the test. Cards that let you automatically succeed at skill tests are pretty rare. What do you guys think about this one?
I really like this as an upgrade in Scenario 7, Scenario 8, when you're about to finish a campaign. You know, especially in the early stages of the Survivor card pool, you generally have some extra experience lying around. Like, this can be really nice to be able to clutch out certain scenarios and certain challenges that you may experience later on in the campaign. It's not something you need early on, but having that ability to just succeed barring the auto fail is pretty nice.
Yeah, even on tests where you're already like over by 1 or 2, just being able to say, okay, I'm succeeding on everything except the auto fail. Pretty nice. One little bit of rules that is worth noting is that because it's an automatic success, it's treated as if the difficulty of the test was 0. So that has some implications for some of the rogues succeed by X effects. Not that there are many investigators that can take both, rogues succeed by X effects and the Stroke of Luck, but it is worth knowing. I think Stroke of Luck, it's actually pretty good. I think its stock goes down a little bit with the revised core because the revised core has Catastrophe, which does a very similar thing without exiling itself. But then again, Catastrophe also costs resources, and Catastrophe is more of a reactive, like, oh, I was gonna nail this test anyway, and oh crap, I drew the auto fail. Let me Catastrophe that. Where Stroke of Luck is more like, okay, I need to like land this evade. I'm a 2 or I'm a 3, and this thing is evade 4 for some reason. Just commit the Stroke of Luck and make it happen. Yeah, it's more for that. Yeah.
It's also nice in Dark Horse as well because it doesn't
Yes.
cost resources. So
True.
You've got that as well. I think it's pretty good. You spend a couple XP on it. You'll commit it to the skill test. Maybe you're like 1 up on something. You commit this. You're 2 up. And you pass the test, and you don't have to exile it, but then it also just has that ability too, which is nice.
That's true. You only have to exile it if you use the auto success. So yeah, there you go. So if you're like 2 up, this is perfect because then you're covering the -4s.
Yeah, that's one point I really wanted to highlight was that this is optional. The auto success is optional. You commit this, then you get to see what the token is, and then you get to decide. It's not like you're wasting 2 experience points just by committing this to a skill test, and then, oh, I passed it anyway. Oh, I just wasted this card. You get to keep it around. I agree, Nate. This is a great card for scenario 7 and 8. This one I know has won me at least 1 game, thanks to automatically succeeding on something that I simply couldn't fail. And because it was the end of the campaign, I had no problems exiling it. So this one is, if you need this kind of effect, or you are concerned about, or I guess if you have a couple of XP lying around towards the end of a campaign, I think you can do a lot worse than picking up a copy of Stroker Luck to help you seal the deal. How would you guys rate this one?
I'm going to give this a +1. While I think it is really good in later scenarios of a campaign, it's not something you reach for immediately. This is something you kind of put in your back pocket and save for later. And in those circumstances, it's really clutch and it's really good. But it's not something you need immediately. So I think +1 is pretty applicable for this card.
I'd say so too, because I'm thinking of decks that I would want to put Stroke of Luck in, and they're usually decks that hit their stride with very low XP. Wendy Adams, Ashcan Pete are both investigators that I think can function really well without a lot of XP. They don't have a lot of like core upgrades to make them do their thing. So once you've got those like 5 XP worth of core upgrades, then you get to start taking luxury stuff like Stroke of Luck, and feel good about it. Yeah, I think this is a
Yeah.
+1.
And I think it's also good in those investigators as well, because they have an alternate means for using this card when, say, you don't want to commit it to a skill test.
Right, it's true. It's true. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm torn between a +1 and a 0 on this one, largely because I do think it is a luxury upgrade, that it's not something that this isn't the first card you're going to upgrade. The effect is very, very powerful, so that certainly deserves a +1, but again, this is one of those cards that, I mean, if you happen to succeed at everything, you don't really need it necessarily. So I think I'm going to land on 0. The power level is certainly there, but it's not a card that I've certainly gravitated towards all that often. And like you said, Mattastrophic, we do have Catastrophe in the revised core now. So if you don't want to spend the XP, there is a level 0 version available that will has a similar effect. So keep that in mind as you're upgrading your deck. That's going to do it for part 3 of our look at the Survivor cards in the Dunwich Legacy Investigator Expansion. Let me know in the comments down below what you think. Any final thoughts on these Survivor cards?
Pretty mixed bag.
Yeah.
Lure and Fire Extinguisher are binder fodder, but Flare is a good card, and I think Stroke of Luck is pretty good too. So, I mean, with the one hand you giveth, the other hand you taketh.
That's going to do it for this episode. If you enjoyed what you hear, remember to like, comment, and subscribe. If you need to contact me, I can be reached at manfromleng@gmail.com. I'm also on Twitter at manfromleng. Until the stars are right, keep your shotgun close and your elder sign closer. Take care out there, and happy investigating.